Hi, I'm Mike Troy, Editor-in-Chief of Retail Leader. I'm here with Randy Burt, partner at A.T. Kearney, who leads the food and drug sector practice. We're at the FMI Midwinter Conference here in Scottsdale, Arizona, in the Retail Leader and Progressive Grocer live video studio. So tell me, I know A.T. Kearney does all kinds of consumer research. You've wrapped up some studies of late. You got your finger on the pulse of a lot of different consumer trends. Talk a little bit about some of the things that you're seeing in the market that retailers and suppliers are adjusting to.
Absolutely, Mike. For the last several years, we've actually been looking at the locavore trend and the move towards local foods and what's driving that, what retailers are doing in response to that, and what the future of that looks like. And there's a couple of things that are very interesting and sort of changing about it. First is consumers continue to really want to understand where their food is coming from. The idea of knowing your farmer, knowing your producer continues to gain headway. But a couple years ago, that really started focused on produce and agriculture, but it's really starting to shift now even more to other products. Could be artisanal cheese, meats, charcuterie, cookies and crackers, jams and jellies are some of the categories that you're starting to see becoming more prevalent. And there's not just a health and wellness halo that consumers are giving to local, but there's also a real desire to support their communities. In Texas, that community might be a radius of 300 miles. In some place like Chicago, that might be 150 miles going to Wisconsin, Michigan, Northwest Indiana. But we're really seeing that take off as a trend and that becoming more and more important to consumers.
Interesting. Locavore. I love that word.
The locavore trend, yeah, started in California like many trends many years ago, but has really gone nationwide now. And it's not just about produce; it's also about living up to all those other aspects that consumers are now concerned about, which really is the shift that we've seen is from what does my food taste like and what does it look like, and perhaps is it healthy for me or not, to not only those things, but also where did it come from? Right. How was it made? How were the animals treated along the way? How were the workers treated along the way? Were sustainable production practices used, whether that's around the water usage or the actual nature of the farming? And so all those things are coming together, and local doesn't always live up to all those things, but it often gets a halo effect around all those things with consumers, and we think that's going to continue to accelerate and be important.
It's amazing the host of attributes that now people care about.
Absolutely.
It used to be, did it taste good and how much did it cost?
Absolutely.
Is it the brand that my parents bought? Now it's like all those things that you just listed off.
Absolutely, it's fascinating. It's a very interesting time, and I think the other thing that's interesting that is happening is that while a lot of this is starting from millennials, we're seeing millennials have upward influence on Gen X and boomers, and you're seeing these aren't just things that millennials care about. These are things that the boomers and Gen X shoppers care about as well, and that's very interesting as well. I'd say that dynamic. I didn't see that as much in the past across generations, sort of upward influence, but I think that means that it's important to all of your shoppers, not just the millennial shopper.
So it creates an interesting dynamic for a national retailer now that has to be concerned about selling a certain type of cheese in Wisconsin or Washington versus Florida. And you have all these smaller, I don't know, micro brand is the right word or not.
That's a good name for it. And we started to frame that and think about that as short supply chain. All these supply chains are built to carry food from all over the world to our table, to our retailer, and eventually to our table. And a lot of the effort against supply chain, getting that right, has been put against how do you get vegetables from Mexico to Maine efficiently and as efficiently as possible. Transportation is a huge part of that cost for retailers. Now there's a totally different shift. How do you get relationships with a lot of local producers that aren't that sophisticated, aren't going to be able to deal with the requirements of getting into a national retailer, which
Right.
are very structured. And
The
so
volume,
the volume, absolutely. And also even some of the paperwork, you can think about slotting, maybe not having the capital to sort of the price of entry for some retailers. And sometimes that's a little different in produce than packaged. But retailers that we think are winning here are really figuring out different ways to develop those short supply chains, is a term that A.T. Kearney has coined to describe it. And they're also understanding that these suppliers are different. They're less sophisticated. They don't have as much they don't have the expertise, and they haven't dealt with getting into a lot of these retailers. Let's say if they're moving from a bunch of farmers markets and now they want to go into a traditional food retailer. And so the retailers that are getting it right are figuring out ways to ease that path and help and support those local producers, because if they can get the products on their shelves, they can really be differentiated versus the other guy.
So local and fresh, two huge trends. Any other trends that you see that equal those?
Yeah, I think health and wellness is a related trend, and this is one where it's really moving from more of a thinking about medicine and cure and to thinking about prevention and lifestyle change. And lifestyle change has many elements to it. So, certainly the food that you eat, people understand more and more how important that is to health and wellness. Your exercise obviously would go in that, and so you see the obvious growth in wearables, the Fitbits, the Apple Watches of the world that are tracking a lot of health statistics, and that's booming. And you also see supplements and understanding how to use those, along with sort of traditional medicines. I think that the food retailers really have a chance to own that space. We talked a little bit about there's a higher level of trust generally with food retailers. And all those attributes exist within the store. We see a real opportunity that isn't really being taken advantage of yet to be sort of the umbrella across all of those things for your shopper. And food retailers occupy a unique position.
Sure.
And we think have a unique opportunity to do that. But they're going to have to bring lots of partners to bear to do that successfully.
So people know they should eat better. Everyone knows we should exercise more. Are you actually seeing that in terms of purchase behavior?
That's a great question, and everyone in the industry sort of knows there's often a lag, either a lag time-wise or just a disconnect between what consumers claim they're going to do and their actual behavior as you think about where they spend their money. But you are starting to see health and wellness take off. You're starting to see movement towards foods that have functional benefit. The whole superfood movement is pretty clear, and you're seeing those categories grow more quickly. Things like broccoli, salmon, almonds. You're seeing those grow more faster than the market, and so we do think that behavior is starting to line up with sentiment, which is not always the case.
Right.
Certainly.
Interesting. These aren't fads. These are well-established trends that are going to be with us a while. It sounds like.
We think so. I think underneath health and wellness, as an example, in local, there's probably some things that are fads, and you've got to be thoughtful about how do you separate the fads from the overall arching trend. But certainly the move towards health and wellness, the idea of having many different things, not just my doctor's visits, that's important to health and wellness, especially as healthcare costs go up. If you can prevent it, then you can head that off at the pass, that additional expenditure. Yeah. And so that as a mega trend, we would refer to it as, we think has real staying power. Some of the things underneath that, like kale, as an example, lost its superfood status. Yeah. Is kale always going to be? Some of those things will change. Some of those things will be faddish. I'm not saying kale will be, but like kale chips aren't taking off the way they used to. You're seeing gluten-free level off a bit. Some of those, I won't call specific things fads or trends, but certainly some of those things will end up being more fads that don't have staying power. And I think there's some nuance required to really understand that, and you want to place bets, see how they do, and then be able to back away from some and double down on others as you see the results of moving your assortment toward them.
So let's wrap up. Final question here: What kind of things are you working on now? Because we're at the start of 2017. Any interesting research projects you're digging into this year? You can kind of tease us. Sure, absolutely. Well, this whole area of local, which extends, again, beyond just was it produced here. It's how do I have impact on my community and support my community? How do I drive all these other health and wellness benefits? And how do I start to use that
from a retailer standpoint to go from like to love, as an example, from a loyalty standpoint. That's an area that we definitely want to continue our research, refresh it. There's some interesting new angles that we're going to add to it this year. And then the second one, I think, is as you think about the shift to fresh and the perimeter, those traditionally are not where food retailers have their strongest contribution margin. And so understanding and helping some of our clients understand how do you still maintain profitability as things shift to what have traditionally been less profitable departments in the store, especially prepared foods, which is a very tough area to make money in, prepared meals. That's a second. Those two areas I think are very interesting to us, and we plan to spend some time and resource really understanding this more deeply in 2017.
Okay. We'll look forward to seeing what you come up with. Thank you, Randy. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure, Mike.
Thank you.